Hello, puppies and kittens. Welcome to another episode of Blasphemers Bible. And we have the usual assortment of blasphemers here. And anybody have any opening announcements, or shall we dive right into it? Because I understand there's a lot of
Yeah,
reading to do today.
There
yeah.
is, but I did want to share with our audience your foray into film, Aaron. You were regaling us with the tale of your wonderful.
We don't have time for such tales.
Oh,
Yes, I wanted to say that, as you see from my title, I finished my degree, and I'm a Bachelor of Science in the field of mathematics.
Well done, my boy.
Thank you very much. And Aaron also followed my footsteps.
Well, I had to because my bachelor's degree is also still on the temporary plates.
there you go. You have to teach us differential calculus another time, Tomer.
Perhaps.
Yeah. And it'll be a maddening foray when you try that with me.
Let's have a differential calculus stream. What a great time that shall be.
It won't be very deferential, that's for sure.
Oh, I think it'll be, yeah. All right, we're not going to leave that. We're just going to leave that. All right, so we're on Exodus 8 today.
I said previously that in the Hebrew Bible, Exodus 8 from the Old Testament starts in Exodus 7:26 in the Hebrew Bible.
Yeah,
and I don't really know why. Yeah, because I think that the arrangement is that in 7:26 is the beginning of the plague of frogs, and maybe they wanted to combine the story into a single chapter.
So well,
that would make more sense.
It's also important to remember that the numbering here isn't that big of a deal because all the content is still there. It's just an issue of how they divide verses and chapters, and that's why a lot of scholars they would cite what it is in Protestant Bibles, and they would cite what it is in the Masoretic text. So they would cite both verses, and it's not really usually that big of a deal because everyone knows what they're talking about. It's not like they're missing verses here or anything. There are missing verses in some Bibles. Let's make that very clear. But this is not one of those cases.
It's just strange because the numbers themselves come from Christian editions, and it was okay, they're going to accept all of the chapters and numbers, but for some reason over here they were no, these few verses need to be part of.
They do that. Yeah, they do it in Psalms too.
And in the 12 prophets.
Yeah,
as well.
Well, it makes sense
at least we've run into that.
It makes sense that this chapter started in the Hebrew Bible, or in the let's call it the original version. It starts earlier because somehow we jump into this one with the sentence beginning with the word "then."
Well, yeah, even I missed the 7 days passed after the Lord struck the Nile because it's clearly part of the next piece.
Well, because the then here, I think it replaces the Hebrew letter vav, which is the end. Because I think most verses in the Torah starts with va, and so the then here starts vayomar, and the Lord said. So it's not that uncommon.
Yeah, some translations just ignore the word and they just don't say and some of them say and then, and some say then.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's a Hebrew, biblical Hebrew thing where it's this verse, this event happened after the previous verse.
Okay, so who's reading today?
It's a multi-person thing, but sometimes I think that gets kind of confusing and annoying, especially when I mess it up a lot. So
there's not that many quotations. I think it's mostly exposition.
I think. Okay.
I mean, I could read, but I don't want to play part. I don't want to play parts because we always jump over each other's lines or.
So read through. I think 1 through 15. That's I think the whole frog plague.
So who's? Sorry,
I can start reading first.
Okay.
Someone else want. So I do
Okay.
it, or
Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. You can do it.
okay. So where are we starting on at number 8, right?
Yep.
8-1, yes.
8:1. No silly voices this time. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Go in to Pharaoh and say to him,
Go into
Thus-
Pharaoh.
Mhm.
What kind of relationship do they have?
Oh my, yes.
Wait, that
Thus
was the
says
NIV?
the Lord.
Go in, it should
This,
be coming.
this is the whatever this thing American thing is. So yeah. Go in to Pharaoh and say to him, Thus says the Lord, let my people go. They or
I think you have to pronounce that. Let my people go. I think you have to say it like that.
Let my people go. Yes, there we go. That they may serve me. What's a sec? You refuse to let them go. Oh, I see. I missed the part here. Okay. But if you refuse to let them go, behold, I will plague all of your country with frogs. Nile shall swarm with frogs, which shall come into your house and into your bedchamber and on your bed, of course, because you can't have it both ways. And into the houses of your servants, because they are little people too, and the people in general, and into your ovens. Fried frogs.
And what exactly is wrong with
What are
frogs?
they, French?
We'll get to
and
that,
the
but
frogs
just
shall the frogs. Ha! Woo! That's bad. Okay, and the frogs shall come up unto you, and you and your people. Okay, no more of that.
I think you
and on
missed
all
out
your
a
servants.
word.
Did I?
Yeah.
I think
you missed.
Really?
After the ovens, there should be something else.
The ovens
Yeah.
and
And
your
kneading
kneading
troughs.
bowls. I said kneading bowls.
Oh, okay. I didn't
Yeah.
hear that.
Okay.
What did you? Is it different in your version?
All right, I've had
No,
enough of
no,
this. I'm
kneading.
taking over.
Yeah.
No.
Then the Lord
I'll
said
go
to
first.
Moses,
Okay.
Tell Aaron, stretch out your hand with your staff over the streams and canals and ponds to make frogs come up on the land of Egypt. So Aaron stretched out his hand over the waters of Egypt, and the frogs came up and covered the land. But the magicians did the same things by their secret arts, and they also made frogs come up on the land of Egypt. Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, Pray to the Lord to take the frogs away from me and the people, and I will let you people go to sacrifices to the Lord. And Moses said to Pharaoh, I leave to you the honor of setting the time for me to pray for you and your officials and your people, that you and your houses may be rid of the frogs, except for those that remain in the Nile. They're still going to have frogs because they're, it's the side of a river. You always got frogs. Tomorrow, Pharaoh said. Moses replied, It will be as you say, but so that you know there may be no one like the Lord our God. The frogs will leave you in your houses, your officials and your people, and they will remain only in the Nile. After Moses left Pharaoh, Moses cried out to the Lord about the frogs he had brought to Pharaoh. And the Lord did what Moses asked, and the frogs died in the houses and the courtyards and the fields, and everything stunk of dead frogs. And they were piled into heaps, and the land reeked of them. But when Pharaoh saw that there was relief, he hardened his heart and would not listen to Moses or Aaron, just as the Lord had said.
Yeah, your book is so much better than mine. Mine's hot garbage comparatively, so it sounds better when you read it.
That's NIV.
California hippie voice is my favorite.
California hippie voice is pretty good. I have to say though, the idea that he calls up a plague of frogs after the Nile turned to blood or whatever, like it's because it's not like the frogs would all run away from the weird water that turned red and poisonous and go on the land.
It's not.
I have to say, I would have been more impressed if it had been something that wasn't naturally plentiful and indigenous to the land, like a plague of kangaroos. That would impress me.
We'll get
I bring upon you
wallabies, mate.
Plague of velociraptors.
Okay, so let's talk about the frogs here in verse 1. So while the frogs are usually identified as frogs that we know of, Ibn Ezra writes that there are some commentators who identified the frogs to be crocodiles. And Aaron, you're going to hate this. He writes that they are a type of fish.
Yes, because the word translated as
I'm
fish
not a
just means sea,
scientist.
like
Bats are
I
birds
know.
and insects,
That's
but
not the
remember,
same.
Jonah was swallowed by an
Um,
actual fish, not a whale, because we must be literal.
Oh, a big fish, not a whale.
Saadia,
but-
Saadia Gaon,
right.
for example, in his translation to Psalms 78:45, rendered the frog to be a crocodile. However, in his translation of Exodus, he renders the frog as the usual frog.
How
And
do crocodiles go in the ovens and kneading troughs? I'm just
yeah, that's the problem.
the
with
little
this
babies, they come
interpretation.
out the toilet, you know, and
bite your
infest the
ass.
house.
Oh,
It would have been better
Um,
if it were a crocodile, because at least they float on the Nile. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Now,
crocodiles.
Now, Professor Yitzhak Avishur writes, the Egyptians attributed divine power to frogs, and they were considered a symbol of fertility. The goddess Heket is depicted as a woman with a frog's head. According to
Oh, hold on
Egyptian
a
belief,
second. The goddess Hecate.
Yeah, Hecate.
No.
Yes.
We have a cat
Wait.
named Hecate, and it's partly
Oh.
because named after that god, and also because her name is Hecate.
Oh,
Yeah, but I think that's a Greek
Hecate
goddess.
is a Greek
Hecate.
goddess, and
Is
Bast
there a
or
is there an
Bastet is the
Egyptian?
goddess of hearth and home, and she has the head of my
Mhm.
cat, Black Cat.
okay, I haven't finished though.
Oh,
So
there is
according to
a
sorry, Tomer.
Yeah.
Jeez.
according to Egyptian belief, she would breathe the breath of life into creatures that her husband, the god Khenum, would create on a potter's wheel. The story in Exodus mockingly describes how the frogs, which were considered by the Egyptians to be a symbol of fertility, turned into a nationwide disaster.
So-
And now verse 6, the frogs came up. So the Hebrew Bible literally reads, and the frog came up, singular frog. So while this is used as a general term to mean many frogs, like you use a singular to like indicate for the plural, Chazal in Sanhedrin 67b wrote that only one frog came up, but when Moses and Aaron struck at it, it was split into many swarms.
Oh,
Yeah.
I was having a whole kaiju thing for a moment. It was like this one frog, and it's 200 feet long and breathes fire.
Yeah, like one of those Japanese demon
So-
frogs.
Yeah,
It's the
Lilith,
frogodile
like,
fish.
It is now.
Lilith, you might like this. So you know how the coloring books in the that I remember from a child, the flood plague had the straws. With the
Mhm.
frog plague, there's a giant frog and there's hundreds of little frogs coming out of its mouth.
Oh
as
my god,
being
it's
hit.
just like Zelda, the Twilight Princess, where you have that giant frog-like creature and it shakes off all those disgusting little things from its back that are like eyes with
Oh,
fish
yeah.
tails. I don't know.
Nice reference, by the way.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
P-Town,
Yeah.
was it one giant kaiju frog, or was it one giant kaiju frog or a crocodile perhaps that explodes into a bunch of different frogs when you hit it?
I can't find a picture of this girdle
That's
frog.
a shitty thing,
god
isn't
lady
it? The
chick.
Bible has no damn pictures.
Giant
would've
frog.
been
I'm
an
all
awesome
over Google. I
picture.
can't find a picture of this chick.
There's the manga Bible.
Oh
You know, I'm
god.
strangely weirdly okay.
Oh
looking at
god.
that,
Okay,
too.
now we need a manga
That could be
artist to do a
interesting.
manga version of the Bible with like
There
giant
is
kaiju
a
frogs.
manga Bible.
There is.
They have
Yeah.
pictures of the
Yeah, but
Greek
There's a
goddess.
Lego Bible too. That was
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah, the
so-
Lego
I wish
the
somebody
Lego
could
Bible
find an
got
animated-
the Lego Bible got banned from a convention because it was not suitable for kids. Not kidding.
Oh.
Yeah.
Huh.
it's-
Wonder
No.
why.
They do
And
put a version the last story in Judges, which was one of the few things that they couldn't find a version of appropriate for children.
So somebody got fired for I think it was a principal for showing a picture of the David, the statue,
Yeah,
the
Michelangelo's
David in
David.
Florida.
Yeah, recently. Yeah,
Oh,
that happened.
I have wonderful
2 days
news
ago.
for our American friends. You know how there's all these book bans targeting LGBTQ and everybody. Well,
Mhm.
in Utah, a fascistic member of their government passed a law to allow parents to ban any book with anything deemed pornographic by a specific set of rules, to which a hero parent has responded by having the Bible banned from their school, because literally everything on the list times 100 is in the Bible.
I was gonna say that the Mormons look at ankles and swoon ever so slightly over there in Utah.
Yeah, so maybe they don't want their children exposed to the rape and murder and dismemberment of a concubine.
Well, the thing about
the Book of
David
Mormon?
is, I mean, if kids look at that, that's no. I mean, he's not really well endowed. I mean, it gives the impression that little boys never grow up.
It's a shame that his name's not Peter and it's David because he had little Peter,
Well, and I have heard that
I'm offended now.
I don't have
I'm officially offended
equipment.
now.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about you.
I don't have the necessary equipment, but I have heard that it can sometimes go into hiding when one is very afraid.
I think it was the style to.
He was afraid of
depict,
Goliaths.
Penises as smaller in statues back then.
Why are we talking
I
about
think
penises?
I think it's
Joe's
really
not here.
weird that we're supposed to be made in the image of God, but we can't look at it. Am I the only one who thinks
That's a
that?
very good point too. No,
That
that's
is
a very
well
good point.
phrased.
That's actually really, really, really good, and that's a good point.
So I have here a quote by Professor Aaron Shulov, who was an entomologist and the founder of the Jerusalem Biblical Zoo. His own explanation of how the natural explanation of the mass appearance of the frogs. So he writes, the mass appearance of frogs here could be explained as a case of population growth with the appearance of a factor that disturbs the existing equilibrium. In ecology, the sum of all factors that contribute to the massive appearance of an organism is called environmental resistance. Of these factors include climate change, which manifests itself in particularly heavy rain or a lack of rain, or in a particularly hot or cold season, and very strong winds. All of these, when acting at one of the stages of development of the creature that massively appears, could create a situation where the population of that creature in the next generation will not remain in its earlier stage, but will increase by tens of thousands. The frog's multiplication could be explained by the disappearance of one or more of the factors of environmental resistance, like the disappearance of natural predators in the Nile or in a body of water, from which the wind could bring the frogs.
Because the fish all died, so there was no one to eat the tadpoles, so all the tadpoles survived and then overran the land of Egypt. That would make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Except that tadpoles also live in the water and have gills and would be basically fish at that point.
Yeah, well, from the point of view of dying in the Nile, or you just
Maybe the eggs survived the blood or something.
Are they not really indiscernible from fish until a certain point of their development, if I'm not mistaken? Frogs? I don't remember.
I'm going to read a couple of comments in here because they're stacking up. So Matt White says, so religion is the adult version of a bossy sibling saying, Mommy says do this or I'm telling.
yeah.
Yeah.
In some iterations, certainly.
Yeah. Wander member. Wander member. Wander is a member for 1 month. Gifted with one RN Raw membership. Thank you very much for that. Then Minute Rice gives $6.66 and says, I prefer the version of the story where Moses and the Pharaoh are singing at each other.
That is a good song.
Yeah. And then Jay Patrick, I think that's how you say that, says, out of curiosity, how much does P-Town bristle from the blasphemy that takes place on this channel? And that's a lot of coming. Did I read that sentence right? Yeah,
I feel like
you
half
did.
of
I feel like they missed
that
a
phrase
word.
is missing. Like
I was going to
coming
say,
from...
when I said hello to everyone in the chat, I was going to say, except Jay, but I just chose not to.
Okay. Shall we
in
continue?
fairness, we do call it the Blasphemer's Bible, so P-Town was warned.
I haven't finished. My final comment on the Plague of Frogs is verse 7. The magicians did the same things by their secret acts. So Luzzato writes that they have taken a vessel full of water that had frog eggs, and in their quote-unquote secret acts, i.e. knowledge of nature, they have fastened the frogs hatching from the eggs.
Wait, what? You're gonna...
Yeah.
Okay. So now
It's
instead
not
of just
magic, it's alchemy.
Yes.
He said knowledge of nature.
Yeah.
yeah,
Hey,
like
I got an idea. Let's overnight breed gazillions of frogs and display and just put them everywhere inside everybody's house. We'll just be like Santa Claus. We'll visit every house and empty out bags full of frogs all in the same night.
Well, and exactly, like, I'm like, how did they call up frogs on the land if there were already frogs on the land? But the idea of like having brought a pitcher of water that actually has some, in it, and being like, we will now produce frogs. See, it's just water, blah, 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 frogs.
yeah. I think the
that
traditional
what's
view
the
is just
problem
that they
with
had
frogs?
the ability to create a frog from nothing,
many
or an
frogs.
illusion of a frog from nothing.
The only problem I can see with the frogs is
Yeah.
if you lick them.
I don't think they're that kind of
That's
frog.
probably why
No.
people thought the way they were. That's actually the good question too. What kind of frogs were they?
Yeah,
There's
what
a lot.
kind?
I'm
There's
pretty sure the
multiple different species.
hallucinogenic frogs are in
Noisy
the
ones.
Amazon.
Kinds.
Noisy ones.
What's
There
the-
is
what
one
species would it be?
commentary I wanted to say about. So I think it's verse 4 in, I guess, the Christian version, and it says, and ascend into you and into your people and into your servants, the frogs will ascend. So, I'm not sure exactly. Rashi brings a commentary from, which I think is a commentary on the Talmud, and it says that the frogs would get into the innards of people and croak.
Yeah, it's
Ah!
Inside that. So like if they go into the bread and stuff, and then you eat the bread, and then there's a little frog in your like intestines or
well,
whatever.
yeah, inside their
Honest
bowels,
question.
specifically.
Is that where we get the term that the person croaked? I'm not kidding about this. I'm actually. It's an
What
honest
about
question.
frog
I
in your
wonder,
throat?
or a frog in your throat. Yeah, those are good questions. Is that?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if this is a commentary on the Talmud, then it would have been quite late.
Yeah.
I think this is a medieval commentary, Jewish commentary.
Yeah,
So I don't know how that would have necessarily
yeah,
entered
Rashi's
like
like
English.
Rashi's like
Interesting.
11th century, I think, 12th century.
Right. So this would have. Oh, right. So it would have. Yeah, but I'm saying he's quoting a commentary from before him. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
I
Yeah,
think that
probably
is
like
where you
from
get
the
croak from.
10th century. Yeah. So yeah. So I don't know. Maybe that story somehow got into an English language and affected those expressions. But I'm sure there's other stories that are similar. Yeah.
I'll have to
That's
look that up later. I'm curious now.
So I did want to mention something about the authorship here. So I know that Lilith has her Bible like all highlighted depending on who the author is according to the original documentary hypothesis.
Yes.
If I'm right there. Okay. So the general, and so I should note here that Van Setters here argues that there would be a priestly source, and he tentatively uses Yahwist source here, so he doesn't have the same understanding of the Yahwist. Yeah, but he does use that nomenclature just to be like a single author, right? And he points out that within the plague stories there are quite a few splits for some of them. Some of them are repeated in another one, and some of them are not. And after essentially arguing for this, he says this general consideration of the priestly wonders may be confirmed by a more detailed examination of a few of the texts, since 3 of the wonders, 1, 2, and 5, he numbers them all. So it would be the rod changed the snake, water into blood, and then boils, it looks like. Have no parallel in J. Only 2 cases remain to be examined. It is possible, in the case of the water turned into blood, that one can reconstruct it as a self-contained unit. One should, however, observe that only in this instance is there no description of an action by Aaron, with the rod corresponding to the divine instruction. The reason for this can only be that this is the one case where J describes Moses as using the rod to strike the Nile. There is no place to fit in another parallel action by Aaron with the rod. Of course, one can always appeal to the redactor for such an omission from P, but this is hardly necessary. In the case of the frog plagues, the assignment of 8:1 through 3, or 5 through 7, to P has left J deficient in an important element in the account because there is no mention of the plague taking place. Yet verse 2b or 6b, the frogs came up and covered the land of Egypt, corresponds in language exactly with what must have been present in J after the description in the prediction in 7:28 through 29, or 8:3 through 4. P has formulated his own account to correspond so closely to J that in 8:2 or 6, the two versions fit exactly. That this is the case can be seen at the end in verse 11 or 15. The first half of the verse, 11a, but when Pharaoh saw that there was respite, he hardened his heart, must follow the preceding statement in J about the ending of the plague and therefore belong to J. The second half, so yeah, 11ab, because he splits it up into 4 sections, actually even more sections, but either way. But the second half, expressed in the terminology of P's other conclusions, must be an addition. This technique of supplementing J's account is likewise used in 9:22, 23a, 35, and 10, 12, 13, and 20, where the same additions are inserted in the same places, omitting the contest with the magicians, which is now finished. And I did want to also note the contest with the magicians here, because it seems like a lot of these wonders are contests with the magicians, but others are not. They are simply just presented as plagues.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I note, and we'll see this going forward, in each point up to this, including this, there has been and the magicians could do the same thing, but maybe not as well, but they could do it and duplicate it. And then you get to a point where they can no longer duplicate.
Yeah, there's God's magic is in a wizard's battle against the pagan magic.
Well, and like I said, the Moses is a warlock, Yahweh is his patron, and the sorcerers of Egypt just got their magic through study. So there's a pissing match going on, and I've noticed that there's the thought here that they will remain only in the Nile was the redactor being like, clarification, he didn't kill all the frogs in Egypt because they're supposed to be there. But yeah, it would be really interesting to me to be able to study this in their initial language, because even I noticed as I was going through this that, the Lord, meaning the Yahweh use, is here attributed to an Elohist source and a priestly source. So I'm like, that doesn't seem quite right. But
yeah, there's
again,
also like a
I'm not
verse
reading
that's
it in the
like,
Hebrew.
there's a verse that says something like, and the Lord said, thus says Elohim.
Right.
And which is
whereas, yeah, and that's obviously, in English translations, when the Lord is in all caps, it's Yahweh, and when it's God, it's El or Elohim or some variation.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify for the people watching at home who maybe didn't understand.
Yeah, so in the translation, it's like, the Lord said, thus says God, something like that.
Yeah,
and it's
yeah,
interesting it uses the two names.
Hey, Lawrence, I have a question for you. In your Egyptology studies in general that we've been talking about the last couple of weeks, have you ever heard any reference of any plague of any kind? I'm not being pedantic here; it's an honest question.
Any reference to what?
Anything to the plagues or any other forms of plagues that you might have heard that ever occurred in Egypt? I can't recall any, honestly, and I'm just asking if you can think of anything off the top of your head.
So we did note that the plague stories are found disparately throughout this. There's not like one big list of the same plagues, but we do find plagues all throughout the Egyptian world and the Greek world that kind of share similarities to the biblical ones. But there's no like one big list of them or anything.
I've mentioned previously Nahum Sanas citing a couple of ancient literature that is reminiscent to the blood plague, and later on we'll also see about the plague of flies as well.
Okay. I just feel that could be a good reference for us to throw in there.
I'm going to read a couple more chat comments. Kicker White Lion offers 50 Czech kroner. Says, I can't hear you, dear. You're muted.
I'm muted. I'm sorry.
I could only hear her because I can hear her in the other room.
Okay, two things before you do that, it seems like that the power of the Egyptian god must be working too. So there must be more than one god here still in the story.
Well, the way
they did the frogs too.
The way that is, you can think of it in a few ways. First, you can think of it in the way that the ancient Israelites before Josiah's reforms would have taken it, where it was henotheistic, where many gods exist, but only one should be worshipped. Or you can take it in the multiple sources of magic approach, where you have one that is divine and one that is practiced, one that is more
demonic,
demonic, yeah.
Using
One
the powers of
one is more like a
demons.
study, and that the people have just gotten really good at, and then the other is divinely given.
Maybe one is sleight of hand, like, "Hey, Rocky, let me pull a frog out of my hat," you know.
I mean,
I take Minute Rice's
these should be
correction that
sleight of hand,
according to D&D logic, the mages of Egypt would be wizards, not sorcerers. Wrong term. Sorry.
Right. Exactly. So
sorcerers got their power through their bloodline. Okay, we had to read the whole comment.
Sorry.
Yeah. So yeah, in the same way, except Moses isn't getting his power through his bloodline, but he is being given divine power. It wasn't something that he practiced at.
Okay. And the other thing is, it seemed like the Pharaoh said they could go worship, but then when the frogs left, he said, "No, you can't." Did he take his word back?
I think that's the next one. Well, no, that's
no. He said, but when Pharaoh saw that there was a leaf, he became stubborn. Literally in Hebrew, his heart has hardened.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that this time it seems like it's using the passive tense there.
Yeah.
And it's really funny because it happens in the New Testament too, where instead of when they're talking about doing works on the Sabbath, the verbs that are used are passive verbs. So it's like these things are happening. Like, and you're supposed to, like Jesus healing someone, right? Like it says like the hand was healed instead of Jesus healed their hand. Like it's that kind of thing it's used as that kind of thing to get around that issue in the New Testament. But it's to me it's funny.
Yeah, well, and again, half the time it's God hardened Pharaoh's heart, which makes it God's fault. Sometimes it's just his heart was hardened somehow.
Yeah.
And then sometimes it's Pharaoh hardens his own heart. So, it's you're dodging. You can see why that's part of why they might think of, multiple sources for this, but it's also sounds like excuse making for what someone said previously.
So
It really
Kicker
does.
White Lion offers 50 Czech kroner and says, wasn't there a Florida man that did something like that, but instead of frogs, did it with turtles, threatening to destroy a town with them?
That would take a
In
very
Florida, I
long
know
time.
crocodiles.
Yeah.
No, there was actually a different guy that did that, but he was from New York, and his name was Splinter.
Curse you, turtles. Oh, beautiful, Lawrence, beautiful.
Right, read on.
You were reading.
I think that's you.
Oh, okay, good. What verse were we on?
16. Read 16.
There we go. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Tell Aaron to stretch out your staff and strike the dust to the ground, and throughout the land of Egypt the dust will become gnats." And they did this. When Aaron stretched out his hand with the staff and struck the dust to the ground, gnats came on people and animals. All the dust throughout the land of Egypt became gnats. But when the magicians tried to produce gnats by their own secret arts, they could not. Since the gnats were on people and animals everywhere, the magicians said to Pharaoh, "This is the finger of God." But Pharaoh's heart was hard, and he would not listen, just like the Lord had said.
Okay.
So here we go. Moses has finally beaten the Egyptian. They can't match it, so the pissing contest. He topped them now, and so
I'm seeing Moses being played by Vincent Price and the Pharaoh's mage being played by Boris Karloff.
So it's
played by
interesting.
Vincent Price. Oh my.
So it's interesting to notice that the KJV and the JPS translate lice instead of gnats. And again, I'm quoting from Professor Aaron Shulov. He writes, several insects could fit the description in the Torah. Gnats, according to the Septuagint. Flies, they or their larvae live in sand and dirt. Mite species that reside in dirt. Fleas, although the flea is mentioned in 1 Samuel 24:14 and 26:20. The biblical gnats could be sewer gnats or Psychodidae, whose larvae develop on moist organic material. Ceratopogonidae, known commonly as no-see-ums, also develop on organic material in wet bitches or in water. A less likely possibility are small tick species that live on other insect species and are found in part of their development process in sand or fine dirt. With their bite, they cause strong irritation.
Well, that would make sense as a plague, especially since all the dust in Egypt, which I don't buy because it's a freaking desert, it's all dust. The plague, but it can't have been flies because the next plague is flies, and so you know.
We'll get to the plague of flies because there's something interesting about this. But you've mentioned that all the dust became gnats. Amos Chacham comments that this could either be read literally, that the dust did indeed become gnats, or that the act of striking the dust caused the gnats to breed very quickly, or their eggs to hatch faster, and as such, it filled the land of Egypt.
Yeah, press X to doubt.
I got a question about this. Earlier we were talking about how
desert has a lot of life.
Some other Egyptian god was like creating people and animals on some like cobbler's wheel, and then like Hecate would come in and do something. So how do we just recognize that's just a story, but we have all these commentators trying to justify this clearly just a fucking story? This didn't happen.
Yeah, when I was a Christian, I don't know how I didn't recognize that Genesis and Exodus were myths and folk tales and such, because I knew the Greek myths were myths. Like, how did I not know?
We don't respect myths in our culture in the same way that they did in ancient times.
Right.
There's a certain amount of, myths were never intended to contain actual history. They were intended to contain wisdom and ideas and values of the people and pass them down, which is what this is meant to do as well. But we don't really respect myths. We call them just stories or just fictions. And despite the fact that, they have a really valuable part in human history and literature and thought, we tend to treat that as dismissive. And I mean, honestly, the simple-minded have always taken the myths literally. It's turtles all the way down. There's always been that element to it. But instead of being sort of, people got really, really upset when it was suggested that these were not literal. And I wish I had my library. The stuff that especially the turn of the last century, the 1920s, and the evangelical movement, there was just remnant against that because they felt like it invalidated their faith.
Right.
I think that the movie Conan really covered it the best. Is that Conan said that his god Crom was on high upon his mountain, and his companion said, but my God is the entire overlasting sky and covers your God. Therefore, my God is better.
I
actually quoted that. I quoted that in a speech in Australia. Like this is what the kind of shit that we get for religion from.
And in several videos, because I've watched all of your old series. But yeah, it's as George Carlin put it, my God has a bigger dick than your God.
Right. Yeah. That's always
exactly
a classic.
what it is. Yeah.
So there is the contest of gods. We'll see that later too. So the kind of bouncing off of what Lilith said there, we should really stop using myth like a dirty word. Like we're using it to mean something bad or simply like not true. But the thing is, myths do contain truth, sometimes historical truths, and actually it's a very good way to like understanding how myth worked in the ancient world can really help you parse out what is true and what isn't.
Yeah, if I could throw something in support of what Lorence just said. I mean, I've always understood mythology to be the associated stories about a given topic. I didn't ever see it as being necessarily fake stories or lies or whatever. That they don't necessarily have to be. Part of the mythology, just as Lorence just said, could be true. These are just the collective stories about that.
Yeah,
it's also a cultural thing too. Keep in mind that the cultures themselves, to really understand an ancient culture, look at their myths, because that will beautifully explain so much about who they are, their daily lives, what they believe, and why they think the way that they do. So when you look at old texts and tablets and everything else, you're able to almost put yourself in that position to be able to understand where they come from and why they are the way they are.
Yeah, it's very useful.
That's the position I took after I read the original Tales of Scheherazade, The Thousand Nights and One Night. There are many Muslim cultural myths that are there that I would not have otherwise known about. And I offended some Muslims online because I knew what the sex worm being implanted into someone, that the origin of that, and they were trying to blame that on some sort of a Christian writer. I'm like, oh dude, no. That's your crap. Don't start.
Sorry.
Yeah, but the Tales of Scheherazade, like, that doesn't tell you what literally happened, though there may have been some reference to some particular famous sultan or some particular famous event. It tells you what a nation valued, what they feared, what they hoped for. It tells you their human perspective. We would always, I know a lot of Christians would criticize atheists as using Harry Potter to describe something, but we're using a common story that a lot of people know for a common frame of reference, because I can't tell you about my friend down the street because we don't live in the same town and you don't know Jim. So, those common points of references and common points of dialogue and common points of discussion about our humanity and our thoughts, like that is an incredibly important function in our dialogue as human beings.
Likewise, I've often referenced Luke and Leia, being sisters, being siblings when they do, because everybody knows that story, right? It's popular. I also mentioned Thanos snapping his fingers because everybody knows that story. So,
well, there is certainly truths in myths. Like if you look at the myth, not literal truths, but if you look at the myth of Persephone and Demeter and how Hades kidnapped Persephone.
Hades.
Yeah, Hades.
I wasn't gonna say anything.
Greek boy. I'm just kidding. Anyways, if you look at this myth, it kind of has this symbolic beauty to it. Like when Persephone they thought underground, they thought Hades was underground. It's winter, and when she's on Earth, it's summer. So it's like observation of how the plants disappear and then they reappear in the spring. There's some truth to it and some poetry and beauty to it. But I gotta say, just with a little small contrary opinion here, that I think they wouldn't be sacrificing to Jehovah if they thought that this was just a story or a mystical story.
Well, the thing is,
we make our own gods in the image of us, not the other way around. That's the big thing to remember.
So I want to actually the lice and the flies here, they'll freak these guys out.
We'll get to the plague of flies, but
oh, I thought, are we not there already?
No, we're in lice.
What the lice? But the
normally it's lice and wild beasts.
You guys were calling them gnats on your translation.
What I said, we'll get to that. We'll get to that.
Yeah, but with this one, which is normally translated as lice, especially within the Jewish tradition, one of the reasons that's given why the Egyptian sorcerers or wizards or whatever could do the first two plagues. I
wanted to comment on this, Isaac.
Oh, you want to say it? Okay.
Yeah, but they
don't.
I'll let you if you want to.
You can comment on whatever you want.
I mean,
go ahead, man.
Okay, I'll go ahead. I mean, yeah. So, I mean, it is Rashi does mention this. You would have come across it, which is, there is this idea in as I was saying, like they actually believed that people could do magic, and magic was somehow powered by demons, or not necessarily it's evil or anything. I think there's stories about Solomon using demons to do certain things. I feel like there's something with him flying.
Yeah,
but,
the Testament of Solomon.
That's
So there is
67b.
Yeah, so there is the idea that people can use demons to do things that are seen as miraculous or magical, and so there is this idea that there are limitations to that magic. So one of those limitations is you can't really have an effect over something that is smaller than a certain size, and therefore lice being smaller than a barley corn, they couldn't. The sorcerers couldn't mimic that trick. They couldn't make lice.
I would also add that Sfono comments that they were unable to produce anything which could truly move on its own.
The frogs.
So the frogs.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Didn't need them to move.
I don't know. He probably thought the frogs couldn't really move.
The magicians.
I mean, maybe the trick with the frogs was like, here's the frog, it makes a noise. That's it. But with lice, like.
So what do we do about the snakes
them to
from
move
before?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's that.
Yeah,
I mentioned his comment just because it's a bit problematic.
Yeah.
Well, this is where they give them the finger. This is where they said,
"This is the finger of God."
Oh, speaking of finger of God, I have a comment on the finger of God as well. So Amos Chacham writes, the magician said the finger of God and not the hand of God to mean that the bringing of the lice was a wonderful creation, a masterpiece, which it is said poetically that this is an act of a finger. Compare Psalms 8:4, when I behold your heavens, the work of your fingers. Another interpretation, a finger of God, there is only a small intervention of some higher divine force, and nevertheless the magicians couldn't do it. In any case, the magicians do not admit here to the Lord, the God of Israel, but only admit that the plague of lice came from some higher divine force.
What was that source again? Sorry, can you repeat that? Like who offered that source? Who offered that source again? Okay, I'm not going to pronounce that.
Interestingly, the finger of God.
This could be the frog god.
Really hard word.
We don't know if it's God.
It is a god. It's somebody with more magical powers than us. And I mean, if at least according to the one interpretation that the magic they get by study is an understanding of nature, then it would be closer to scientists than magicians.
Mm-hmm. And that's why it's juxtaposed here with the finger of God. That it's actually God's work that's being done here. And the issue with the finger of God, really interesting. So
I can't do it, so it must be magic?
when in I believe Daniel, there's said to be a finger that comes out of this wall and starts writing, right? And then also in it is a later edition, but also in the book of John, you have the pericope adulterae, where at the end of that, this is the woman taken in adultery, that story. So at the end of that story, it says that Jesus wrote on the ground with his finger. And now there are a few steps missing here. But I would say that is another interesting thing to just keep in mind, that the only person that is said to write with their finger is God in the Bible. So that's of course the importance for the association of Jesus and God for the Gospel of John. But when it comes to our purposes for today, we see that this is something special. This is seen
that's
as
where we
being
get
different.
the idiom today, the writings on the wall. Because
God
wrote
Belshazzar and the finger of God.
There you are.
I would also add that the Aramaic translations and Sadagon translate the finger of God as this is the plague from God. Don't really translate with the finger.
Like a
smiting. This is the middle finger.
All right, I'm stacking up on comments.
I can't help thinking when y'all keep saying finger of God, that God's saying, here, pull my finger, and flies come and frogs.
Yeah. Is that why we have clouds in the sky?
That's how the universe got created, Leandro.
We've had this joke before.
That's the Big Bang. It's a big fart.
So Joe G the first says, if Buffy the Vampire Slayer lived in that time, she would have fought Moses and sided with the Egyptians.
I would watch that movie.
Iconoker says Yahweh would have used emus instead. Australia went to war against them and they lost in 1932.
Yes, they did.
Instead of kangaroos,
the
plague
Great
of
Emu
kangaroos.
War. Yes.
Yeah.
Randolph Richardson says, which finger is the finger of God? Is it the middle finger? Because God doesn't seem to be very fond of people.
Not wrong, Richard. Randolph, not wrong. Sorry.
Minute Rice offers $5 of snake money. Thank you very much. We have another Snake Appreciation Day next week.
It's going to be Matt Dillahunty's birthday, and he's going to be there too.
Oh, yay!
Fort Worth.
Yeah. What is it? What's the event called, dear?
Herp Nation, I think.
Herp Nation. Yep.
Reptile Nation. No, Reptile Nation. Sorry.
Reptile Nation.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So getting back to the comments, Matt White, new member, says for Tomer, lice are arachnids, not insects. I believe Aaron covered this recently.
Well, two things. One, Professor Shulov used the word for insects, harakim, and second, they are from the class Insecta, so they are.
Yeah,
insects.
I was about to bring that up because
lice are insects. Mites.
Matt White is thinking of mites. Mites and ticks
were one of
are
the options
arachnids.
Mentioned.
But lice are insects.
Well, whatever this was, it was something very small and very bitey.
Yeah, so he used the general term insect for the general public because that's how we understand.
Small and bitey, just like my ex.
Yeah. When I was a young man, I think
I was going to say something, but I've said too many jokes today, so that was all you, Lawrence.
I feel like
the word I knew
biblical...
was saber-toothed crotch crickets.
Ah!
No. I don't want that in my nightmares. Oh, God.
Yeah.
I think we need like a biblical cladogram, like these are what fish are, this is what cattle are.
That's what Arn has been asking for. He's been asking. He's like I rewatched that debate with Hovind recently, and he's like, "You're describing clades." Like,
no, but that's a different system. Yeah. That's called.
For
what they call it baraminology.
Baraminology.
Baramin.
Yeah, bara mean created kind.
Two created kind, 2 words.
Yeah.
But they call it baramins.
Yeah. So Boda says, did Aaron ever cover the salamander god controversy within Mormonism? I'm not even aware of this.
Salamander god.
This looks like something you could look up for Joseph Smith tomorrow.
Yeah.
Please. I'm definitely going to have to ask him tomorrow.
I'll be there.
Very good. All right, that's enough of the comments for the moment.
There were a few other ones.
Reading?
There were a few other ones suggesting that Herp Nation, you might want to check if that's really a snake convention or something you might want to avoid.
I've been to Herp Nation. I know what it is, and I get the joke.
Worst part is that they sell pies.
All right.
I misspoke. It's Reptilian Nation is the name of the expo. Reptilian Nation. So stop thinking about herpes.
Okay, so that's where we'll be next Sunday.
Okay.
And where are we in the reading?
Verse 20. We are beginning with the plague of flies.
Okay. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Get up early in the morning and confront Pharaoh as he goes to the river and say to him, 'This is what the Lord says, let my people go so that they may worship me. And if you do not let my people go, I will send swarms of flies on you and your officials and on your people and on your houses. And the houses of Egyptians will be full of flies. Even the ground will be covered with them. But on that day, I will deal differently with the land of Goshen, where my people live. No swarms of flies will be there, so that you will know that I, the Lord, am in this land. I will make a distinction between my people and your people. This sign will occur tomorrow.'" Just so you know, wherever God is, bunch of flies. The Lord did this. Dense swarms of flies poured into the Pharaoh's palace and into the houses of his officials. Throughout Egypt, the land was ruined by the flies. Then Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, "Go, sacrifice to your God here in the land," because that's a thing that a real God would really need, a sacrifice. No, the only reason sacrifices exist
Aaron,
in practice
please.
at all. What? Sorry,
keep
my
going.
comment.
Yeah, later.
All right. Why can't I make the comment? Because it's just not a thing that a God would have.
I'm liking it.
It's Aaron's show.
like it,
he can make the comment.
Yeah. Okay. You know what? Fine. Do it.
We did tell the show last week.
I'm
Probably
sorry.
You know what?
for that
Priests
now.
love barbecue.
Just
They
don't
do.
lose
They
the
love
hippie
barbecue.
voice. More
I'm
hippie.
sorry.
This is just to get. This is just for the faith. You have to show how you really believe. This is the power of pretend, and that's what you're trying to demonstrate right now. If I didn't really believe this bullshit story, why would I kill my last cow? That's what this is all about. Subservience to the clergy and all of that. That's what it's about. It has nothing. A God would not want this. A God would not have this. Not a real one. Okay, and so but Moses said, that would not be right. The sacrifices we offer the Lord our God will be detestable by the Egyptian or to the Egyptians. And if we offer sacrifices that are detestable in their eyes, will they not stone us? We must take a 3-day journey into the wilderness to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God as he commands us. Why? Pharaoh said, I will let you go to offer sacrifices to the Lord your God in the wilderness, but you must not go very far. Now pray for me. And Moses answered, as soon as I leave you, I will pray to the Lord, and tomorrow the flies will leave Pharaoh and his officials and his people. Only let Pharaoh be sure that he does not act deceitfully again by not letting the people go to their sacrifices to the Lord. Then Moses left Pharaoh and prayed to the Lord, and the Lord did what Moses asked. The flies left Pharaoh and his officials and his people. Not a fly remained. But this time also, Pharaoh hardened his heart and would not let the people go.
Okay, so first of all,
but the third bowl of porridge was just right.
Well, I just like to point out that Pharaoh pretty clearly knows that go for 3 days means forever, and he's trying to argue with what they're literally saying and say, yeah, only do what you said you're going to do, not the thing that I know you're totally trying to do, which is all run away. And so you run into the deceptive language thing here again, and yeah.
I have something I want to add real quick before you say anything, Comer. I want to hear your commentary, but I just want to get one thing that really irritates me is about the stoning parts. In fact, this is something I'm probably going to be talking about a lot in the book here. Why is it that it always seems to be in that time period that everyone's so afraid of being stoned, like rocks on the ground and stuff like that? Because God, being so powerful and everything else, should protect his own people. Why doesn't he just conjure up, for example, and this is just being pedantic here, a couple AR-15s and give them to Moses and his crew? And that would solve that problem. So my issue is this: it's always stones. It's always don't cast the first stone, don't do this and don't do that. So very basic, blunt stuff, some very early versions of how we inflict war and pain. And I can't get over that.
The most brutal, cruel, crude, infantile, primitive manner possible. It's not even a knife. It's Stone Age, literally. And it's
literally Stone Age stuff, yes.
Brutal and fearful. And it's a part of this. And, I wouldn't despise an ancient people for being, having that point of reference. What I despise is the idea that that should be a modern ethical standard and that we should hold this as somehow inherently virtuous in a day and when we have gone farther and could go farther and grow farther if we let the past go.
And this is another thing too about this, which is why I get it. This is what really kind of taught me that there's a lot of problems with this book and books like this, is that the references to things are of that time, and it's what people knew of that time. They didn't understand the things that we know today. They didn't have the technology that we have today.
And it was a barbaric
saying
time.
that, and it was a very unexplored time. But the old story about how any form of technology can be indiscernible from magic at some point. I mean, if someone, for example, happened to conjure up an AR-15, that would be considered magic. Black powder, gunpowder, that would have just awed everyone, like, oh, it's a magician, because we've actually have references of that. And it scared the crap out of people when that was invented. So whenever I see stonings or slings being used, or very basic early examples of the technology of the time, the people didn't know anything besides that. They couldn't understand anything besides that. And so all of this stuff just points to the fact that these are just the stories and myths of that era for the people that made their gods and made the god in this book to represent them, not the other way around.
So you're a god. Yeah, you're God. Now we got a bunch of different arguments about what do you do to convince the Pharaoh? Now you're going to change the Pharaoh's mind. You're going to harden his heart because you're a dick and you play both sides of the chessboard. But ignoring that for the moment, let's say you're not a dick god. Let's say you're a smart god, and Egypt has these people held in slaves, and you decide that in slavery, and you decide that slavery is bad. Your own scriptures say that it's okay, both Old and New Testaments, constantly advocating for slavery. In Christianity is based on slavery. So when you take away slavery, you basically take away, the tenets of Christianity. But let's ignore that too. You're God. You want to convince the Egyptians that slavery is bad. How do you do it? Do you give them AR-15s? Do you send in an F-16 for 10 minutes? Let's just look at what my fighter jet can do. Or do you take a reasonable approach? Do you maybe show up? Or give reasons and rationale, or why don't you target the fucking Pharaoh instead of targeting everybody else?
And that would be responsible and fair. But again, in those days, there was this attitude that, again, this is a hierarchical authoritarian approach where you'll see this in, God, I'm having flashbacks. Sorry, Lalandra, trigger warning. I apologize. But for this concept of divine mantles of authority, where you have God and the king and the aristocracy, and you have the priests and the head of the home, and then you have the wife, and then you have its children, and this series of umbrellas, which is usually shorter. It's just God, pastor, husband, wife, kids. That somehow this is not just a system of governance, but a divine order. And I have literally had it advocated to me as a child that if you are under the authority of a specific pastor, for example, that will affect you spiritually if the pastor falls into a specific kind of sin. This was an example of why a lot of sexual predators would be found at the same church, as opposed to just that there was an environment there that protected abuse. This is something whereby it was considered appropriate, if not necessarily just, that the servants and serfs and those under the Pharaoh will suffer for his crimes, and that was the order of nature. And even you can see this all the way up to who's read Shakespeare's Henry V?
Years ago, yes.
Okay, well, prior to the great battle with the really awesome speech, whoever, the Band of Brothers thing.
Let's let the dog to war, yes.
Yeah. Henry V disguises himself and goes throughout the camp to sort of get the measure of the soldiers and what they say and how they're feeling. And one of them says, and he says,
I have that speech almost memorized.
And it's fantastic. I have portions of it memorized too. But he asks them if they think the cause is just. And one of them says, even if the cause is not just, we will be vindicated before God because our obedience to our king vindicates us. He is responsible for if his cause is just. We are responsible for obeying him.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the moral order as it was understood. And that's the moral order as understood under monarchy. And while I find it abhorrent on many levels, it was also stable and possibly was, it's part of our infancy as a species. It was a brutal rigid, stable system that, perhaps was the first step out of barbarism, but we need to move past it.
I concur.
I don't think these are just flies. I think.
Are they just?
You want to
I wanted to comment on this, but I first want to.
Aaron, there's some crazy bugs in Texas. Creepy, alien-looking, giant,
accurate,
God-fearing bugs. I think that these flies were like unworldly.
You think they were like horse flies that you can't even swat? You got to roll them.
I saw a bug in Texas once that was like the size of a cat. It had a stinger like 4 inches long. It looked like
a Volkswagen label on it.
Came here straight from another universe.
Maybe it was the locust of Revelation, and we're in the end times now.
Oh man,
go ahead, Tomer.
So first of all, I want to apologize to Aaron that I've interrupted you. It's just that I wanted to keep the structure of first reading the text, then commentating, but I don't want to make it my show. This is your show. You're the host, so I apologize very much.
Don't sweat it. Don't sweat it. Give your commentary, sir.
Okay, so about the swarms of flies. So in Hebrew, it's arov. According to Exodus Rabbah 11:3, the arov was a mixture of wild beasts and carnivores, as the word arov probably comes from irbuv, which means mixture. And this is the usual traditional interpretation of the arov. This interpretation is also given by Josephus, Targum Pseudo-Jonathan, Saadia Gaon, and Ibn Ezra. Rashbam comments that these were wolves, known as arov, or erev, who were called so because of their habits to hunt at night. Now, Rabbi Nehemiah, again from Exodus Rabbah, comments that these were several wasps and mosquitoes. And Rashi, I think, also says that they were a mixture of scorpions and snakes. The Septuagint
how do we know which of these?
Hang on, I haven't finished. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
The Septuagint also translates dogfly, and the Vulgate translates to flies. Later commentators like Lutzato, Casuto, and Amos Chacham also accept that the arov were a mixture of insects, because the insects here is more it's more appropriate for the description because they also enter into their houses.
So I feel like here the translation that Alter uses is horde instead of swarm there, or instead of swarm. Sorry, I should say for arov. He uses horde because he doesn't want the implication that it's necessarily, because when you say swarm, it kind of is closer to being like a bug or an insect or something like that.
But swarm would imply it monophyletic. I mean, it'd be one collection, one species. Whereas horde.
Maybe for the biologically minded, but at this point in time, like they probably wouldn't have thought of it that way. So having horde, it kind of gives a more vague look from the Hebrew, and like he even says that the King James version swarm of flies is as good of a guess as any, because it could be a whole bunch of things.
Yeah, and it's
so the
gnats
were just small and bitey, and these are flying and bitey, but not locusts, which will come later.
Yeah, so what we got, with Tomer reading all of these, well, this random guy, very very respected, but blindly speculating, says that it's probably these, and then this other guy who doesn't know any better says, well, it's probably that, and then some other guy with his head up his ass says, oh well, I have a degree, so there I'm right. And I can speculate about something that nobody even knows. And there's no way to know who of these guys is right. They just all say what they want to believe, right?
Well, none of them are right because it never literally happened. It's a myth.
I know, but they're not even taking that stance. I mean, they're taking, a lot of these people are taking the stance that it did happen, and they're going to try to find some way to justify it.
Just imagine you're at Comic-Con. Imagine you're at Comic-Con. These are DC versus MCU nerds talking about whether or not Thor can give his power temporarily to a bunch of children.
Sometimes it's it's very scholarly. Sometimes it's like we have this word. It's got an ambiguous meaning. What could this mean that fits in well with the language that's used around it? So, for example, the word kind of literally means mixture, so maybe it's a mixture of like, animals, but then it says, oh, it goes into their houses, so maybe someone else would be like, okay, maybe it's specifically a mixture of smaller animals that can fly into the house.
Well, they're
stuff.
probably
feel
still
quite-
shoveling dead frogs.
And
I
also,
feel quite certain about this, that if we could find if there was a way to find an original author for any of this crap and get him to show pictures or give clarifications about what he means, that all these people with all of their other interpretations, oh, is that what you were thinking? Well, fuck, I can't believe that.
Yeah.
So
there's a good chance of that.
Yeah, the traditional Jewish thing is it's a mixture of wild beasts, and as going back to the coloring books, you had like the lions and the bears and the giraffes, because those are very ferocious. And, and maybe that's how they got into the house.
It's the horns. That's what it is.
I think Ibn Ezra. I think Ibn Ezra literally says lions and tigers and bears. Oh my.
Oh my.
I was hoping you'd say that, Tomer.
Oh yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, so this is, I just think maybe it was whatever was feeding off of the dead frogs that were still piled up everywhere. Because I don't know, they didn't have the sense to burn them or whatever. But clearly it's gross. It's gross, and it's probably bugs, but it's definitely gross.
Although I'm completely down with having a plague of flies when you've already got gazillions of dead frogs.
That makes a lot of sense.
Happen.
Yeah.
I would
They
add
put them back
that
in the river, didn't they? I can't remember.
No, they all died. They all died where they were and stank up the whole of Egypt.
I will add that Nahum Sana.
Yeah, but sanitation job security right there. You know what I mean? Make a fortune.
Lady Chicken, Tomer started his sentence like 3 times.
I'm done.
Unions.
Tomer, please continue doing it. Please,
Okay,
my dear
so
friend.
Nahum Sana comments here. The Egyptian composition known as the Prophecy of Neferohu, or the Prophecies of Neferti, supposedly tells of the reestablishment of law and order by Amenemhet I after the collapse of the Old Kingdom. Among the misfortunes that befell the land is an invasion of wild beasts before which the citizens were powerless. The Atrahasis epic from Mesopotamia seems to indicate that the plague of flies was narrowly averted.
How do you narrowly avert a plague of flies? Like, I know you narrowly avert a thunderstorm if it just passes you by and doesn't hit you. Did they yeah.
So to avert
they
plague
drew
of
with
flies,
a marker on the map, where it was going to go.
To avert a plague of flies, really all you got to do is just close the screen door.
And my final commentary is on verse 23. I will make a distinction. KJV translates to division. The word that is translated is fedut, which also appears in Psalms 137-8 in the context of redemption. The Aramaic translation render pulkan, meaning deliverance, but this interpretation does not fit with the context. The Septuagint translates distinction, and several traditional commentators like Rashi, Ibn Ezra, and Rashbam accept this interpretation.
So I want to bring down an interesting story. It's almost like a mythical beast that you might not have heard about, but it is there is a relationship to one of the verses that we just said, and that is in verse. Let me see. This is 17 for me, so it would be
21.
21. Yeah.
Yes.
So it says at the end of the verse, it says, the houses of Egypt will be filled with the mixture of, and as well as the land upon which they are. And so there is this tradition that what this is referencing is this mythical beast that is called Adnei Hasadeh, which can kind of be translated literally as man of the field, like wild man. But it's also...
Are we saying God sent Slender Man after them?
No, he's talking about Enkidu.
Yeah.
So it's the word has a similar meaning, but the actual description of this beast is very different. So this beast is described as it has the form of a man, but it's a wild beast, and it has a umbilical cord coming out of its navel that attaches it to the ground, and therefore it can only go as far as it's the length of this cord, and so you don't want to get. And so the idea was that God somehow magically brought this animal to Egypt with the earth it was attached to. There's we'll get to it later on. There's a bit where it talks about the different types of magic that are not allowed, and one of them is it talks about like
Yidoni,
the tradition is sorry,
Yidoni.
Yeah. So there's the word they use is Yidoni, and the traditional commentary on this is that this was taking a bone and putting it in your mouth and being able to kind of speak prophecy and stuff. So there is this thing that this beast that we just mentioned is also the same beast that the bone comes from. And there's like so many different like descriptions about it. And one of them is like it babbles, like it speaks, but you don't understand what it's saying. And there is like a later commentary that says it's an orangutan. Which,
bone,
yeah,
by the way?
Yeah, maybe
man of the field kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
So like
Did you say
man of the
bone?
hills. Yeah, it's possible a translation error. The man of the mountain, meant like the word for mountain could be Tor, which is similar to Tavar, which means navel. So like that's probably where the idea of the whole navel cord comes from. But it probably was a traditional beast that was like,
every
the man
monster
of the mountain.
we invent, we have to invent a method of control, a way by which we can, if we don't say its name, or we don't go outside after dark, or we don't follow the strange noises or the lights in the swamp, or we don't do the whatever.
Stay away from the moors.
Exactly.
Yeah, the only thing I can
it's a
think
very
of,
scary beast. Yeah.
Then we'll be safe from the monsters we conjure in the dark for the parts we don't understand.
This kind of reminds me what we were talking about mythology, like what they believed about these stories. And people will say atheists are somehow deficient because they don't have a spiritual life, but that's what these myths kind of bring out, these stories of these monsters and stuff, that a lot of ancient peoples and even people today have this added spiritual life. Like the Aborigines, I think they called theirs the dream time,
Yes, the dream time.
And so like this, what it's showing you when we're reading this is people and their spiritual lives, and like atheists who don't have any kind of religious beliefs or beliefs in magic, but we've met atheists that do, like one who believed in alien DNA and humans, but yeah, but I've heard other atheists say that we find our spiritualism in the universe and knowing things and stuff like that.
There's great joy in learning about the universe. There's great joy in knowledge. I've always found that. I realize not everybody finds joy in the same things, but I do think that our imagination, what spirituality appears largely to me to be, is our imagination protecting us from the dark and bleak horror. And we tell stories. We make our lives make sense through stories. And those stories grow fantastical elements because it's more interesting, it's more fulfilling, but it's also a way to protect ourselves a little bit from bleak realities. And I think the alternative to that is simple courage. It takes great courage to live. It takes great courage to love, knowing that every love story ends with boy loses girl or girl loses boy. It takes great courage to face life and find value in it without telling yourself that it'll all be okay. And because we don't. And yet we can find that courage. We can do that. It's a matter of whether or not you have that strength to face that. And I think a lot of people don't give themselves credit. And I think that's one of the things religions often do, is tell people you're weak, but God is strong. You're corrupt, but God is good. You're this, you're that. I am very strong. And I know that from my experiences. And I won't be told otherwise, because I know I've faced terrible, terribly painful things. And I'm here because I chose
One of my family members is an amazing artist, and she has always said that, well, we thought that she was going to be a cartoonist for years. In fact, I even gave her one of my art tablets with the hope that she would be encouraged to do this. And instead of going to college, she decided to get married and have children. And she's extraordinarily religious now. And I asked her why one time, like, oh, well, I don't actually have any talents. All of my talent was given to me by the Lord. And it's all up to him, not because of me. And it broke my heart because she had such beautiful natural talent and decided to go a different path because she didn't have enough confidence in herself to do it. So I just wanted to add that because I understand what you're saying, Lilith.
I'm sorry that I'm interrupting, but
I think P-Town needs to say something.
Yeah, so go on.
Please.
Speaking of courage, I think these magicians jumped ship because they didn't show up on this piece.
No, well, they got outdone by the possibly gnats, possibly lice, and they have not shown up since. I don't think they
did come up again in the boils.
They're
plague.
Out of the
And I think that being a mommy and taking care of kids is a very courageous thing.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on somebody's comment real quick because Tomer's going to say we got to get back to reading.
Yeah, because we also have comments as well. So, but
yeah, Godseed says also shared mythology is a social glue, and this is very true. Notice how like conquerors a lot of times eliminate their the wherever they've conquered, they eliminate their religion and impose their own. It gives people a social community identity together. Like the Romans actually adopted the Greek mythology, but
the Romans adapted a lot of different religions into their own as a means to be able to make the people more willing to join their cause. It was a way of kind of bringing them into the fold,
which worked for quite a long time.
Yeah,
it did. It was very successful.
Same thing with their saints.
With Vietnam, they in my ancestry, they replaced the French Catholics replaced Buddhism there.
That's too bad.
So and now it's an atheist nation largely because of China and Russia after the communist takeover.
Those commies.
One thing I want to point out before we did continue the reading, it's about the reading, so no one get your everyone relax. So yeah, on this this thing of the sacrifice, right? For the abomination of Egypt we shall sacrifice. So it should be pointed out that Alter says that the most likely meaning is that the Hebrews will sacrifice cattle or other beasts considered taboo by the Egyptians and so infuriate them. But I should point out that these sacrifices were not really seen as a bad thing in the period that this is supposed to be in. They were very accepting of a whole bunch of sacrifices. They didn't really have I mean, they had the Apis bull cult. They had a whole slew of sacrificial rituals for different animals, and these things weren't necessarily considered taboos until far later. So this kind of thing shows a knowledge of a later period, if anything. So and when they point out that, for example, the only place that won't have this is the land of Goshen, right? So of course that is the one that is mentioned in Genesis.
Yeah, as being the only place where the shepherds could be, because that's where the sheep were, because the Egyptians hated sheep.
Right. So in terms of the segregation,
the land Pharaoh gave to Joseph.
Yeah, but that was the reason for it, was because they were shepherds. Tell them they're shepherds, and then they'll send you over here where all the shepherds are, away from the rest of them, because shepherds are gross.
And the thing is, this does speak to a segregated indicative of a later period of Egypt, probably around the 5th century BCE.
Yeah. No, I remember that, and that's clearly
Jewish
an issue of a later time where there was an issue with shepherds and ickiness.
And to wrap it up, so
Yep.
I was trying to get to those. So Deviant Outcast says, for the panel, we all know fingering takes more precision than fisting.
God.
While no toolbox is complete without a sturdy fist for more demanding work.
I don't know. Actually, if it takes more precision,
So Jay Patrick says it's possibly these flies that are they're referring to are shad flies. If I remember correctly, those flies are found in the Nile River and found their way into the St. Lawrence River. I don't know one fly from another, really.
Some of them can be pretty nasty and really take bites out of your skin. We're talking, there are lots of flies that are bigger and more troublesome than the common housefly.
Yeah. Then Joe G says, first sacrifice in the Bible wasn't successful, leading to the first murder. Just saying, like prayers, it doesn't work.
Nothing fails like prayer.
Amy Waterhouse offers £2 and says, "You're all cheering me up while I've got the lurgy."
Oh,
maybe allergy.
Hay fever.
I'm not sure. And then Azri Schizophrenia says, "Hi, Aaron. I'm a fan of your equality and progressive values. Quick question. My question is, do you believe people should get married with purpose? Teach your children something?" I'm having a problem with this question. Do you believe that people should get married with purpose? I got married for a purpose. I got married for a purpose. I don't need the marriage. I don't even believe in the institution. I want the tax benefits. Yeah.
In Sweden and other parts of Scandinavia, I cannot remember the name of it. I know someone in chat will say it, but there is a sort of a pact between two people to have children and have a family, but they do not get married. And it's a really common practice. In fact, marriage is sort of kind of becoming not so common. And a lot of people, at least from my generation, are not getting married as often, but still having families. So besides legal, financial reasons, I can't really see them justify that. And I don't think that that's going to be a problem.
Yeah. I think
you have bedside rights for, somebody that's particularly significant in your life. I mean, that's one of the things that we got married for. That was one of the two things we got married for. Otherwise, I had my first child with a woman that I was never married to. We lived together for years, but we didn't see the purpose or point in getting married because at that time our taxes wasn't an issue to talk about.
I can tell you one.
Okay.
First of all, I'm going to say I don't understand the concept of forming a family and agreeing but not getting married, because it seems to me that a marriage is the formation of a new family unit. But knowing someone I can speak to who recently lost their spouse and is going through all of the practical hassle that goes with that afterwards. It is so much fucking easier. It is so much easier. House and marital assets are in both names. It goes to the survivor. There's no hoopla. Everything goes to, if you have both your names, everything goes to the survivor. The amount of hassle when that is not the case, and when the last of two spouses dies and then their children have to do the amount of hassle involved, I cannot overstate how much it is and how exhausting it is if you've just lost someone you care about. It's bad enough if you are married and you can just survivorship all that shit. It is infinitely worse if you don't.
Yeah, and I get that. And I mean that's why I'm married now. When I was a young and dumb in my 20s or whatever, all I wanted to do was rebel. So I just wasn't going to go with any traditional anything.
Fair enough.
So Deviant Outcast says, for the panel, while slaves were a thing in
ancient Egypt, I think.
Ancient Egypt, the Egyptian economy wasn't dependent on slave work, as is the case with contemporary and later cultures. Right. So we get the statement that Egypt apparently built their pyramids not with slaves, but with paid craftsmen.
Yeah.
As I understand it. So, and then and then Deviant Outcast puts in another comment, says slaves were more the exception than the norm, which should be a hint vis-a-vis the accuracy of the biblical account. Well, we're not. Yeah. And then Wander says gifted 5 RN Raw memberships. Thank you very much. And then deviant outcast again. Now let's not always see it in the same hands. When knowledge is lacking, we find comfort in magical explanations. With greater knowledge, the greater the understanding of the complexity of life, the greater the need for simple. I don't get that. And then Bruno says, why would you want to waste your time breaking down the Bible if you don't care? It makes no sense. Well, obviously I do care. Because I have something I believe in. I believe in truth.
I mean, no,
those who believe in truth, those who believe in truth tend to hate lies. And we hate to see people deceived, and we hate to see people throw their lives away believing absolute hogwash.
So
I would say,
if I can, sorry, you can go ahead, Tomer.
I would say it's like asking, why are you studying the Iliad if you don't believe anything of this happened? I mean,
yeah,
I personally find it. I personally find the Bible very interesting, so that's why I study it.
Yeah.
Yep. So I studied the Iliad and the Odyssey. The same reason.
I made a video a while ago. It's called "Should Atheists Study the Bible?" and I give my reasons for studying it. And not unlike Tomer's situation, I also find it very interesting, and I feel that it can give us a lot of information, and it's not going to be the. And I brought up this. I forget the whole quote, but it's a quote about the intertext. The text not just of the Bible itself, but also of the time period of the Bible, other texts as well. And all that stuff can give us a lot of information about the ancient world. The thing is, when you look at these ancient works, it's not exactly what the work is telling you that you should be taking. It's what it's not telling you. It's the stuff that was seen as just common knowledge that didn't have to be said. That is incredibly important. And this can give you insight into their philosophies, their theologies, really a whole slew of things. And this is the Bible is a valuable piece of evidence of ancient Israelite traditions. And if we want to reconstruct the ancient world, this is going to be a piece of evidence for it.
And also, some of our panel live in the United States, which is a nation currently being overrun by fascist, extremist, right-wing Christians who are perfectly happy to destroy the lives of everyone around them on the basis of, if it is suggested to them that this might not be entirely literally true. It's happened before in history. It'll happen again. The USA was actually...
Arn and me live in Texas. Women here can no longer get an abortion if they're raped.
Yeah, you don't have human rights anymore because of people who believe that this must be taken literally. And it's not even that they believe it literally. They believe that it must be taken literally, which is a fine distinction. And I did see the one comment you found, Lilandra, of someone who thinks that it means insecurity, that we might think it's true. And I just had to laugh.
That's
also,
it's
so childish. And it's such a, you are what you call me kind of a thing, because it speaks to someone who has never considered finding something interesting without thinking it literally true. I mean, do you have no hobbies? Do you have no friends?
I would also add that this logic would also be applied to the Iliad.
Watch a movie!
Yeah, the Iliad.
Iliad is a wonderful thing.
But it sounds like insecure that you might think it's true. I mean, you could apply it to every text that people would study and they don't take it literally. I really don't understand the point.
By that logic, Comic-Con is evidence that people are afraid that Thanos is really real and is going to snap us out of existence.
That's what I was about to say. Did this guy watch the Avengers movies? I mean, why would you watch the Avengers movies if you don't believe they're real? Is there a chance, Bruno, just to throw a question out there? I know I'm not going to get the answer. I just want Bruno to think about it. When you watch the Avengers movie, are you worried that it might be real? Or is there absolutely no fucking chance that any of this is real? So I know that God is as real as Thanos, meaning neither one. I am no more afraid of Jesus than I am of Darth Vader. They are the same thing. They are imaginary characters, and that's it, and that's all.
And yet entire economies are run on debates about the history and the selling merchandise. And I mean, how many people have video games of one of these things?
Bruno put in another comment saying you wouldn't make a whole channel like this if you weren't a bit insecure. So that explains
I'm not afraid of
the thousands of Christian channels that are currently on YouTube.
Yes, actually,
which means they're all secretly atheists. Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. I accept the premise.
Revelation,
all
Lawrence.
the Christians are terrified.
Then he said, Bruno said, that's just your opinion. Like, that's just your opinion, man.
Okay, dude.
But tell Mayor, go ahead.
As Lilith pointed out, we live in a country that is overwhelmed with Christian nationalists. It's dangerous. God can do fucking nothing. God never can do his own work. He always needs some sycophants running around pretending to be doing God's work. Those are the people I have problems with, because those are the ones who are actually taking away our rights and enforcing their ignorance on my populace. That's what we're about.
Just like someone else commented named Godseed How, is abortion a power women are just entitled to? Yes, we're entitled to autonomy over our own bodies.
I'm sorry that I'm interjecting, but are we going to read chapter 9?
Yes. Oh,
the plague on the livestock. Oh, the poor livestock. God is guilty of cruelty against.
Yeah, I've got a couple more comments to get through. Let me run through them.
Shouldn't take
Robert
too long.
Athenat says, Aaron, you really have to talk to Power Word, P-Town's mentor. You will be highly entertained by his epistemology. Perhaps. Maybe somebody will set that up.
Is it a revelatory epistemology? Oh.
I have no idea. It doesn't matter. Godseed How says, is abortion a power women are just entitled to?
Yeah. I think Landra commented about this.
But I wanted to add the fact that Godseed How does not care if like a 12-year-old is raped and has no access to an abortion because of their biblical beliefs or their religious beliefs. This is why we read the Bible and why we try to deconstruct it. Some of us are ex-Christians. We're not insecure at all about the Bible being true. We're just concerned with the harm that it causes. And I just wanted to say also that I'm not sure if Texas has a 6-week abortion ban anymore, or it's no abortion at all. I have to go back and check. But like most people cannot even be aware that they're pregnant at 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So it's so cruel that this Godseed person, because of their religious beliefs and because the people in Texas, that anybody who's raped has to carry their rapist baby,
even if it kills them. And it's sick, because women should have the right to control of their body, and that means that no one can use my body without my permission. Even if you want to indulge the fantasy that a glob of cells without a brainstem is somehow a person, it doesn't matter. I have the right to my body. But this is the thing, is that it affects many, many areas of life. If Christians practice their religion in private among consenting adults, we probably wouldn't be here. We'd be at a beer convention or a Comic-Con or something.
Snake convention.
Well, for the record, I just want to say that I'm on team God, Bible, and babies. Someone's got to say
You think we're not on the side of babies?
Okay.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what you were saying, P-Town.
Let's not get down into that.
That's going to be
I don't want that.
Yeah, we can talk about Numbers 5 later. We'll get there.
When we get to it.
We've all set our piece. Yeah, we've all set our piece, so we'll leave that.
Yeah.
Okay, so then Wonder says, for the panel, did you hear the news from Uganda about LGBTQ rights? Any comments on
I have
that?
a feeling it's not going to be good news.
Yeah, I don't think I have. I was recently interviewing a
depressing.
Ugandan, but I didn't hear anything about this.
Isaac, did you hear about it?
I saw something on Twitter that they recently passed a law about, I can't remember if it was being homosexual is illegal or identifying as homosexual is illegal.
I think it was being
something like
homosexual,
that.
I think. or like anyone who's
Something
out,
like
like
that.
out.
Yeah.
Hasn't that country been through enough?
Yeah.
Well,
No doubt.
evangelicals brought their homophobia, so no, apparently not.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I saw an
so
argument with someone about, like, you know, historically, you know, it was the Christians that brought the homophobia
Mhm.
to Uganda. And there's like reports from before that Christians are like, you see these people, they allow homosexuality, they're bad, we need to bring Christianity to them.
And there were
And,
variant gender
now-
identities in the indigenous peoples of the Americas before the Christians brought their rigidity there too.
True.
There's always been
But they think it's they think that the homophobia is like traditional to them.
to
and
them,
it's not.
which
Yeah.
how many of our traditions, I wonder, because I'm largely, I'm obviously of mixed European descent, but more British than anything else. And I wonder what my ancestors believed that was destroyed by Christianity. And I wish I could reconnect with that. But I can't go back to before the Norman conquests and the Anglo-Saxons and all that. So
on reading the next chapter, thinking plague on livestock, plague of boils, plague of hail. We're going to want separate commentaries on these.
why don't we just take it a plague at a time instead of a chapter at a time?
It might be a good
We
idea.
could do.
I'm
If
down
you
with
like,
that.
I'll jump into this one. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Go to Pharaoh and say to him, this is what the Lord, the God of Hebrews, says. Let my people go so that they may worship me. If you refuse to let them go and continue to hold them back, the hand of the Lord will bring a terrible plague on your livestock in the field, on your horses, donkeys, and camels, on your cattle, sheep, and goats. But the Lord will make a distinction between the livestock of Israel and that of Egypt, so that no animal belonging to the Israelites will die." The Lord set a time and said, "Tomorrow the Lord will do this in the land." And the next day the Lord did it. All the livestock and the Egyptians died, but not one animal belonging to the Israelites died. Pharaoh investigated and found that none of this shit ever happened, that it's a fairy tale. Sorry. And found that not even one of the animals of the Israelites had died. Yet his heart was unyielding, and he would not let the people go.
It's
Okay,
always
my
the
only
stubbornness of the bad guy and never the fact that nobody appeared to find it convincing at the time, and maybe it was exaggerated reports.
I have only one comment here about verse 3, a terrible plague. While the BDB dictionary renders the word devil as the word for the pestilence as pestilence or cattle plague, the Septuagint and Targum Onkelos translate a very great death. But I think that the great death also represented the pestilence because it was widespread and common.
Yeah, and I remember Tomer and I think, I don't know if Isaac was there or not. I feel like he might have been. When we were talking about how because the Greek word that's used there, I think this is the verse I was looking at, was that thanatos, right? So the word means death. However, there is an association of that word for death with pestilence. So this would be death by disease, and it's assumed not only here but even in Revelation. When we get to death riding on his horse, that horse is said to be the color chloros, which is usually translated as pale, except it would be more of a greenish yellow kind of color. It'd be the color of sickness and disease. So the association for the at least in the Septuagint would be that yes, this is, even though it just does say death, it does mean pestilence because of that association.
I would also like to note that it says all the livestock died of the Egyptians, which doesn't leave any livestock left over for their firstborn to die in a couple chapters.
I think I don't know if Ibn Ezra or Rashi talks about it, but when we get to that,
Rashi answers that.
Yeah, I'll talk about this.
My one actual comment on this verse would be on this passage so far would be on what God says at the beginning there. Thus said the Lord God of the Hebrews, let my people go that they may worship me. So the reason, so it's giving them, access, being let go would give them access to worship him. So this is in a time before the tabernacle and a time before the temple. So the insistence that they need to be let go in order to worship him already presumes a proper way of worship that in the story has not been established yet.
And even a proper location, which again, has not been established as part of the story, although there is obviously several myths focusing around a mountain in the desert with, the binding of Isaac and the burning bush and everything, although that just happened. So it's, there's, it assumes a lot of later material, kind of like, with Noah and the saving of 7 pairs of clean animals.
Gave him a little bit of a
want me to
scrub
read the
before he
next
went onto the boat.
plague?
Yeah, plague of boils.
Okay. Then the Lord said to... What?
No, never mind. Go ahead.
Then the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, take handfuls of soot from the furnace and have Moses toss it into the air in the presence of Pharaoh. It will become a fine dust over the whole land of Egypt, and festering boils will break out in people and animals throughout the land. Otherwise, we'd have to do something rational, like explain why slavery is bad, and we're not going to do that. So they took soot from the furnace and stood before Pharaoh. Moses tossed it into the air, and festering boils broke out in people and animals. And the magicians could not stand before Moses because of the boils that were on them and on all of the Egyptians. But the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart again, because he plays both sides of the chessboard. And he would not listen to Moses and Aaron, just as the Lord had said to Moses.
This is
So why is God telling Moses to do all these things to convince Pharaoh, and then he's unconvincing Pharaoh?
To show off, obviously.
Why is God doing that is the question I want to ask. Like, why?
Because God is bored.
Yeah, it's like sadistic pleasure of watching like a magnifying glass burn an ant or something like that.
And people,
every time the theological argument is that he does such things for his glory, which means he's showing off. But I have to say, this is the second plague where the magic used has been about dust, and it just brings back Marjorie from Fat Fighters.
There's another important point here. If God is hardening Pharaoh's heart, as it says here, then either the Bible is not literally correct, or people don't have free will. The Pharaoh clearly does not have free will. God decides what Pharaoh's going to decide, right?
I think we've talked about this in the previous episode.
We have, or at best, people have intermittent free will.
So
but it's definitely not literally true, because hardening someone's heart would probably kill them, and also wouldn't have any effect on the decisions they make.
I didn't think they had stents in ancient Egypt.
Well, we've got somebody on the panel who thinks it's literally true, and that people have free will, and this contradicts both of those assumptions.
No, it demonstrates how it's both.
It demonstrates how what's both.
Well, God does harden Pharaoh's heart, but he also lets his heart be hardened, because there's time. It's interchangeable.
Okay, so God is in control of everything, and we don't have free will. So that demonstrates that we do not have free will.
So I think.
Well, I mean, you can argue that since God made everything, everything's God. I mean, if you want to go that deep, but here
I've had people make that argument, but I don't. But what it's stating here is, we're talking about a story that clearly did not happen. We're going through a lot of unnecessary theatrics. The theatrics are absolutely unnecessary, and this is just God playing a game with himself. Convince Pharaoh, and then God unconvinces Pharaoh, so we have to go through the next ordeal, which punishes everybody else except the Pharaoh. And so why would God is not clearly a God would not really do this?
Look at how stubborn people are. Look at
because God makes them
went
stubborn.
To demonstrate how stubborn we are.
Yeah, because God makes them stubborn, and God goes through ridiculous theatrics of plagues of flies and stuff like this, rather than using reason.
Well, it does say that God is responsible for the hardening of Pharaoh.
Serve him.
So I beat you until
you
left
no,
me.
God doesn't do that. By the way, we're obviously not going to get
myself.
you, so we'll just continue on.
Tomer.
Yeah. My commentary. Sorry. Soot from a furnace. So in verse 8, Amos Chacham writes that the bricks are burnt in the furnace, and so there's an eye for an eye punishment against the Egyptians. They've enslaved Israel with bricks, and now they'll be sick from the soot of the furnace from which bricks are being burnt.
And they'll have boils on their ass.
Yeah.
Which
And
is uncomfortable.
In the presence of Pharaoh. So Sfono comments that this was done in order that he would see that the plague was not a natural phenomenon, but a miraculous one. Amos Chacham writes that this was done in the presence of Pharaoh to increase the contempt of the magicians and of Pharaoh.
The magicians are back.
And
the
the festering
contempt of them. Yeah.
And now they're all
Covered in
toasted.
boils.
Yeah.
And now the festering
guy.
boils. So KJV reads boil breaking forth with blains, and JPS reads inflammation breaking out in boils. The word that is used, that is translated to boil, is shchin. The name derives from the root shin chet nun, which is used to describe something hot or dry. Several identifications have been given to the exact disease of the shchin, including smallpox, chickenpox, hives, eczema, and schistosomiasis.
So the water is poisoned. All the frogs come out of the water and die all over the land. Bugs spread everywhere from the dead animals. A plague breaks out in the livestock. A plague then spreads to the humans and infects them with horrible...
Because the humans were obviously too close to the livestock.
And bitten by the bugs that were also possibly infected. But the livestock die and the humans just break out in these horrible festering sores.
It says the boils also infect the animals, which leads to the question, what animals?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Weren't all the animals dead?
I also comment.
And Tamara has the answer.
Rashi comments here, if you ask, whence did they obtain these cattle? Has it not already been stated in verse 6, and all the cattle of Egypt died? I replied that this judgment was decreed only against the cattle that were in the fields. As it is stated in verse 3, the hand of the Lord is upon thy cattle which is in the field. And everyone who feared the Lord took his cattle indoors.
Yeah,
so it's like a bit of a... this is a bit of like an excuse, like, oh, why are the bad people getting punished? Oh no, the people that believed in God, even the Egyptians, they would take and protect their animals and bring them indoors, and so they wouldn't suffer from the plagues.
Yeah,
and
a lot of people live with their animals in the same household sometimes, all throughout literally every part of the world at one point or another. I'm not sure how much the Egyptians did this, but I know that it was massive in northern parts of Europe.
Yeah, but you wouldn't bring your herds into your house.
Not your full herds, no, but like
you might have a barn.
Yeah, you're right.
I will also add
eating purposes.
Yeah. Sorry. I would also add that Ibn Ezra said that it doesn't read that all the livestock of the Egyptian died in verse 6, but most of it. And I really think it's a stretch.
It is a stretch. Yeah. Well, hold on. You said in verse 6, right?
Yeah.
So, and the Lord did this thing on the next day, and all the livestock of Egypt died. But of the livestock of Israel, not one died.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
but he says that the word for all, kol, means most of, just to explain the future verses. But
I mean, maybe
again,
he takes it. It's interesting because, like, the next verse it says, or it says like Pharaoh investigated, and he didn't investigate and find out that all the animals died. He investigated and found out that none of the Israelite animals died. So maybe that was where he...
I mean, there's always the option that God then tortured the surviving Israelite animals because asshole, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense in the story.
Yeah, that wouldn't make sense, yeah.
No, it doesn't. And the first couple plagues affect everybody to some degree, but there's the distinction made more and more that they don't affect the Israelites, although the Israelites were not affected by the blood one. That was... like you say, with the two straws.
That doesn't say it in the text. That's like that's a tradition that none of the plagues affected Israel.
So
just mention a couple of them that explicitly that.
Just for a little bit of context here, so the Greek, the Septuagint does say all. So it does say panta ta ktena ton agipton. Yeah. So
that's fair. I mean, the word kol is almost. I can't think of any other examples where it would mean most and not all, but it could still be like it means literally all, but it's used in.
I just want to throw something out there. I'm just okay. So you're God, and you don't have any. You're not a smart God. You're not a very smart God. I mean, you've only got simple ideas. You have a goal. You want to free the people. You want to free the Hebrews from the Pharaoh. Do you send some guy with a lisp? Some guy who admits that he can't speak properly, and you're going to send this guy to be your messenger. You're going to play all these ridiculous games over all this time and torture all these people. Why not? Let's just say that you're not a really smart God. You've got one good idea. Why don't you just take the Pharaoh himself implant telepathically in his mind, or speak bellowing through the walls, if you like, let my people go. And then when he says no, have him suffer some extreme pain until he changes his answer to yes. And then the whole story is gone. There is no story, because that's the whole point, that this is just a story. But if there was a God, and this is the goal, this is one thing. I mean, a God would like to have lots better options, none of which would include plagues of anything.
But that wouldn't be as narratively satisfying.
Maybe God's the one that actually has the lisp, and that's why we have so many misinterpretations of the word.
That would explain.
That would make a lot of sense.
It's the power of the narrative.
Yeah. It's got to be done for the sake of the story. So, but a couple more comments before we get out of here. Amy Waterhouse offers £5 and says, "Lurgy is a UK colloquialism for a cough/cold. I'm just hoping it's not COVID." Yeah, hoping it's not COVID. And then Sean C gave $5 and said, "Maybe God had warehouses full of frogs and bugs next to the ones with the lightning bolts and snow." Got to do something with them.
Surplus.
Otherwise, it's
overstock. It's overstock from China.
Fire sale. Everything must go.
all those millions and millions of animals that die in their egg, or die as a infant and go to heaven. So God had too many of them, so he sent them back.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So I don't think we're going to get into the next plague today. We will be meeting next week.
The next plague's going to be fun.
Yeah, I have like 2 pages of commentary on this. So yeah.
Yes.
So which days in April are we not having the show? So
yes, I was curious about that.
Next week is the first week.
I would say the first week of April. We do have that Snake Appreciation Day, and it is Matt Dillahunty's birthday, and they want to have dinner on Saturday.
Yeah, but it's not this next week, which is the 1st of April. That's like the 6th, 7th.
Huh? Oh, the second week. Are you talking about the American Atheist Convention?
Okay, so my wife is wanting to take another, on top of everything else we're not doing on April. She wants to not be here so that we can do the Snake Appreciation Day. Is that what I'm hearing?
I don't know. I guess we could tell Matt that we'll be there after noon on Saturday. I don't think they're going to be there Sunday.
Is that the 1st, the 8th, or the 15th?
The 1st.
Yeah, she's right. We kind of have to be there on the 1st.
Okay, so next week no show.
Yeah, I don't want to do that. Can we got at least a play.
We can do a shorter show.
It's National Atheist Day.
No, that was yesterday. No, that was 2 days ago.
Team Atheist.
March 23rd. So you can take that holiday because it's April Fool's Day, and everybody understands that a fool is one who too readily believes improbable claims from questionable sources on insufficient evidence. So it's no surprise that the Bible and the Quran both use the opposite definition from common parlance, because those books are both trying to fool you.
It's my daughter's birthday party.
Okay,
Saturday at 11. And I haven't talked my wife into doing the Bible study all the way up to when the party starts. So
okay, well I'll tell you what.
I'm on the cut.
Yeah. How about that we could do this last plague. We could finish up this chapter. Can we just do a short show, and then
on
he can
Saturday?
Get to his starters? Yes.
Okay.
I like that a lot. I like that idea a lot.
I'm down with that.
Okay. Sure. All right, so we'll just do it because we gotta get through this Bible somehow, and the next weekend after that on the Saturday the 8th of April, we will be in Phoenix for American Atheist National Convention.
Awesome.
Then let me say we will be here the 15th, but then on the 22nd we're going to be gone again. We will be. Oh no, I will be here. I'm doing a debate that evening, but I am here that day, so I can be here the 15th and the 22nd. Did somebody else say they were going to be gone?
The 22nd.
You will not be here the 22nd.
Is that SatanCon?
No, SatanCon is the next weekend. That's the 29th.
Okay.
And then On the 6th, the first weekend of May, the following weekend after that, we'll be in Colorado for, Canada. We'll be in Canada for ReasonCon.
Canada.
I didn't even know we had a ReasonCon. I need to hand in my atheist badge.
I see that Neil 504 is in the comments. Are you going to be at ReasonCon, Neil 504? He's a Canuck.
604, yeah, he's a Canadian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so this April, the 1st of April, we're going to have a show, but a shortened one.
A short show.
No show. 15th, there will be a show. And then the 22nd.
And 22nd, there will be a show.
No show.
Yep. We will be short show on the 1st, and then full show on the 15th and the 22nd.
Oh, and the 22nd. Okay, cool.
Okay.
Yeah. But then we're skipping like 2 weeks at a time. I apologize for that.
Sure.
So we'll be back on the 13th of May.
What city are we going to be in Canada? Neil 604 Atheist is asking.
They're going to be in Alberta.
Alberta.
Can you pick me up on the way through? I tease.
We'll land our plane and you got to land right here. Wait a second.
I've driven with Neil. He picked me up for an event when I was on the island over to an event with the Canadian Atheists in Randall.
Yeah, but I'm not driving to Alberta from Texas.
No, of course not. Don't be silly.
That's a journey.
But send me a link for the ReasonCon because I wanna see their website.
Okay, will do.
Ooh.
And one more super chat, and this is Deviant Outcast says offers 100 Swedish kroner. Says ending of last comment was lost. Abbreviation recap. Understand life's complex. Arrow pointing up. Need simple answers to bring a feeling of safety and comfort. Hence, religion, conspiracy theories, and woo in the modern day.
Well, you can always watch Why Do People Laugh at Spirit Signs if you want to have a giggle at some really weird woo.
Yeah.
Spirit
Signs is special. And they have new animation styles too.
I thank you, everyone, and I really apologize at having to take so many days off. I'm wondering how we get through this Bible when we have to do that all the time. And it has to be on a weekend. That's the awkward thing, because the weekends are prime time for me.
Yeah. I don't know. What do y'all think about a weekday one? Does it have to be?
The weekday one.
Lawrence says
close to
weekday.
the same time because I work in the evenings.
Yeah, I would like that too.
Yeah, we could probably get through the Bible if we moved this to a weekday.
I bet we could.
Maybe I don't know about me personally.
Oh no.
But it maybe if we like once when we don't have weekends, maybe I don't know.
Okay, well let's do that. Let's set up alternately when we can't when I can't be here because I'm out of town. Maybe some of the rest of you could do a Tuesday or a Wednesday. Then
I think so. Yeah,
potentially.
Maybe.
Also,
right.
I don't know about everyone else, but nights are generally better for me. But
definitely.
Yeah.
Do you want to do a Tuesday or Wednesday night on April 1st?
Well, that gets difficult for Tomer because it's already nighttime for him.
I'll get to it.
True.
This is what we get for trying to coordinate people on 3 continents.
Yeah.
All we need to do is add someone from Australia and we'll never be able to meet.
I can lose my the sleeping time.
Is 5 o'clock is 5 o'clock our time a good time for you, Tomer?
Well, now he's going to have to do math. Oh wait, he likes that.
After the show, we should do
He's a masochist.
We should wrap it up
we need
and see if we can figure out some
we need to do this.
Right.
We'll communicate an email for the rest of the week. We'll come up with an alternate plan and we'll make that announcement when we meet up next time.
Sure thing.
Yeah.
That work for everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, everyone, and see you next week.